No, so if you look at, for example, the number of cross voters, and I want to ask Abhijit Majumder this, there's got to be an explanation for why 104 MLAs, and this, by the way, mind you, there are 10 more states to be counted. So this is just at the end of the third round of counting, where 20 states have been counted, or 19 states have been counted, and there are 104 MLAs and 17 MPs who have cross-voted. Now, it's one thing to say all politicians are thugs, you know, they would have done it for money or whatever. You know, I don't want to get into that. Fact is, I think leaderships of political parties, leaderships of opposition parties in this instance, have missed a trick. And the trick is this, that they were not able to sense how people were willing to look beyond their political affiliations to vote for this candidate, because they sensed, individual MLAs sensed, that there is a historic nature in this election, there's a historic nature in this candidate, and therefore they're willing to break ranks with their own parties.
Zaka, Droupadi Murmu ji as presidential candidate this time was politically unputdownable. You know, most people who cross-voted realized that they would do their own careers a bit disservice. They realized the historic nature of this entire election and the candidature, and which is why they couldn't vote against Droupadi Murmu. They voted with Droupadi Murmu. I am a great admirer of Rashid Bhai's political acumen, understanding. But I want to say something. Democracy, yes, democracy is about numbers, not about consensus. I understand, we all understand that. But there are times, I'm just talking cold politics here. Opposition sometimes, in cases like a Balakot attack, for instance, or a Uri surgical strike, if opposition had actually sided with the government, it would have it would not have lost credibility and appeal in the eyes of this 1.4 billion citizenry. It missed a trick. Even this time, they were anyway going to lose. There was no harm in just being a little magnanimous, having a consensus about Droupadi Murmu ji. As about whether this is symbolic and, how symbolic, how powerful the message, I have, for a brief part of my childhood, very early childhood, I've lived, my father was posted, so I lived in a tiny place called Khuti. Khuti has now grown into a town and all that. At that time, there were hardly any pakka ghar hi bahut kam the. So he was working in PSU. And it's a completely tribal area. And if I'm not wrong, Birsa Munda is from there. Now, I have seen with my eyes the kind of struggle, the kind of life that tribals, especially tribal women, they would walk walk for miles to just get drinking water. There was somebody called Bharali who would bring drinking water from miles away to to that small town, then some villages around it. There were others like her. So for people, probably some of us don't understand the power of the message that Droupadi Murmu ji is being the president of India, the Prime Minister standing for her at events, the armed forces saluting her as their commander-in-chief. That is something else. One should understand it's a very, very powerful decision. Imagery. It's a very, very powerful, call it symbolism, but what this does is, this tells that person, that little boy or girl in some remotest part of India, that I can someday be there.
Yeah.
And I can work my way up. It's a very powerful message. It is not something to be taken very lightly. It's not just another presidential election.
No, I absolutely agree. And to say that symbolism will only take you thus far, well, point taken, but then symbolism is a big part of politics. Let me get Nalin Kohli to respond to that, and then I'll come back to you, Supriya. Nalin Kohli, what the opposition is saying, you heard what Supriya is saying, that A, it's symbolic. They're using the comparable example of, we just had a Dalit president, Ramnath Kovind, but how much has the plight of Dalits improved in the last 5 years? Nalin.
Well, how much did the plight of Dalits then improve under K.R. Narayanan ji? Well, this is the Congress party's opposition to find fault with everything. I mean, to put it bluntly, how many people died during COVID of starvation? I can recall decade after decade people dying of starvation. And mostly they used to be Dalits and underprivileged people, whether they were tribals. Have you ever heard a story like that, Zaka? You've covered it long enough. And if Supriya will just go back to her old days of not being a political spokesperson, she'll recall it too. She won't have selective amnesia on that. The point is that the government of today, which is Prime Minister Modi's government and which is the government of all Indians, whether the Congress likes it or doesn't like it, is a fact that this government gave food grains to 80 crore people at the time when everyone needed it. So therefore, it's not about symbolism, it's about work. It's about dignity. When toilets are built or if a gas connection is given, and 7 to 8 crore of those women who have the Ujjwala gas connections, they buy the second cylinder, the third cylinder. Because there's dignity, they don't have to burn firewood, burn their eyes or trouble their health. They are Dalits. They are underprivileged. They are poor people. They are tribals. So it's not symbolism, it's work. And therefore to run down Droupadi Murmu ji and say, no, I am expecting you to rise above symbolism. She doesn't need anybody's advice because she rose beyond it when she served. From a councillor to an MLA, from an MLA to a minister to a governor, she did it. It wasn't symbolism. You don't win elections on symbolism. You win elections with work. And that's something, of course, that's how we function. That's how we believe in it. The opposition party wishes not to believe in it. It's their choice. And in honesty.
So Supriya, I know it's not a comparable example because one was a direct election, this is an indirect election. But why is there a historic nature of an Obama being the first black president of the US? Because it is symbolism. It is the symbolism of being the first black man to occupy that office. Therefore, I mean, if you were to look at a similar story of a person coming from a deeply underprivileged class of our country, in a remote part of our country, to rise through the sheer dint of her hard work to get to the highest office in this land is no less a story, symbolic or otherwise.
I thought I started off the show with saying this is a huge day. So I'm not disputing the symbolism. What I'm disputing is the selective claims of the BJP. Just for your reference, and I want to say some things which are very pertinent to this debate. Every 15 minutes, there's a crime against Dalit in this country has gone up steeply under your government. 45 lakh people in this country died due to no treatment, no oxygen available due to COVID. You have not been able to dispute those numbers. And Ujjwala, sir, 5 crore women have not been able to refill those cylinders. Let's not get there. As far as this election, Zaka, was concerned, I started off by saying it's an election to India's highest office, but it is an election where there are two competing ideologies. There is one ideology which believes that if you come from minorities, if you come from a certain, other linguistic group, you are not as Indian. And there is another that believes, no, all of us are Indians and we have equal say on the high table. And I would want to point out one thing here. It's all very good that we talk about symbolism. We should have a Dalit president. We should indeed have a tribal woman president. How many Dalit chief ministers does the BJP have in 17 of its states? How many Dalit chiefs of the RSS have been elected so far? You know what the number has been selected so far? The number is a huge zero for both those answers. You know how many Dalit presidents has the BJP had? One. Caught, of course, accepting bribe. You know how many Dalit chief ministers has the Congress party had? Several. At least 6 that come to my mind. 3 Dalit presidents of the Indian National Congress. We made the first Dalit president. We got the first Dalit woman speaker. The first leader of opposition in Rajya Sabha is a Dalit, who's Mr. Khadge. So let's move beyond symbolism. Put people in positions of executive power.